Jim Heffron from the University of Vermont. A couple of months ago, people at Vermont were kind enough to listen to me talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is free textbooks. And I had a little trouble making a recording of the talk, so I thought that instead of the actual live talk, I'd make this recording. I'm sorry you'll miss the excellent questions and the good conversation, but I don't know what to tell you. The machine was locked down pretty tight, so this is the best I could do. Okay, so the title of the talk, Free is Good, is that I'm trying to get across some sense that a person might have that there are good reasons to make your work freely available instead of going through traditional publishers. Not always the right thing to do, but sometimes the right thing to do. Okay. So free textbooks just in general. So free textbooks are like free software. You can usually get them just by anonymous download, so almost no friction in getting them. Typically, everything in the book, images, videos, etc., is all under a free license. And in fact, most typically, you can actually get the source and freely modify it. You could, even if you find that you have the ability to, you could offer the modifications back to the author in case they might help. Maybe some typos, corrections, maybe even some updates of some sections. So just as an example of a typical use case, you might find somebody's Calculus 2 slides on their GitHub account, and you might say, oh great, that's hours of typing that I don't have to do. But when you look through the slides, you see that one of them, maybe the one on complex analysis, it says that the multiplication is done by looking at the Taylor series for e to the x, and that doesn't work for you because you don't do the Taylor series for e to the x, or don't do it till later. Okay, so you have the source, you can make some small modification, and so all that work is still perfectly recoverable, and you get to use the resource. Sometimes when I talk to folks about free material, about free books, sometimes they seem to have the impression that this is some kind of hippy-dippy, wacky, fringy thing. I don't think that that's really true anymore. Now that the distribution of books no longer requires the production of a physical artifact, many authors in our subject are choosing to distribute their work in that way, and you can get a sense for that by just Googling. Say if you Google free partial differential equations textbook, you'll get a good number of responses from perfectly reasonable, credible people who have put an awful lot of work into it and have produced good results. You could also have a look at the Open Textbook Library or the American Institute for Mathematics Open Textbook Initiative, and you'll see that there are lots and lots of very high quality, perfectly good choices for a class of yours. There are hundreds and hundreds of examples in English alone. I mean, this is something that perfectly reasonable professionals, like the people in the goofy picture that I found somewhere, perfectly reasonable professionals who are just getting their work done will do. This is one of the ways that today people who do this for a living choose to distribute their work. One of my favorite examples is the Utah Online Educational Resources Project. Makes K-12 work for the state of Utah, which is hardly hippy-dippy, hardly radical fringe. So why do it? I like to think that it can help things get better. There continue to be many, many wonderful people doing wonderful work who publish it with traditional publishers and have great reasons for doing so. No question about it, absolutely right. But there are some reasons to suppose that having a option for free work, having people seriously consider free work when they go to teach a class, could conceivably make the kind of environment for all of us better. And just to give a couple, so wider variety. When the barriers to entry are lower, it's reasonable to suppose that there will be a wider variety of things available. A couple times I have been looking for a textbook for a standard class, and I requested a bunch from publishers, and I ended up saying, maybe I was on a committee and I said to the other people on the committee, these are all the same. They have, it's not quite true that if you open each one to page 219, they all say the same thing, but it's awfully close. So maybe if there are free textbooks out there and people are doing different things, maybe there'll be more choice. Another Students keep the books. I hate that students rent their textbook. I hate it. You need a textbook the whole time you're in college, and maybe after. This business where you rent the book and you don't really own it, and that's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It's bad with a capital B. It also makes adopting supplemental text, that kind of thing, much more reasonable. If in your syllabus you say, here's a supplemental text that you might want to look at, and the text is free, compared to a text that costs $30, what do you think the take-up rate is going to be? Well, I think it's going to be higher. Another is the potential adopters can examine the whole text right away. If they find a link, they click on it, they look at it, boom, 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 boom. They don't wait 3 days for the salesperson at the publisher to get back to them with some kind of weird thing where you have to have a key. Anyway, boom, 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 boom. They look right away. They can tell yes or no whether this is whether your work is something that they might want to incorporate in their class. I'll say that the lack of commercial pressure is, I think, it has very strong potential to be a positive effect. Look. We all know that some authors, I have a 14th edition here sitting on my desk that I use for one of my classes because that's what everybody at the place uses. 14th edition, come on. They didn't have 14 separate great ideas. Come on. They're just putting out new editions trying to just grind them out. Come on. I think if the texts are market independent, that there's some possibility that they could be better. And in particular, they could be more nimble. If things happen, then just as an example, the large language models, if things happen, then authors can respond to it more quickly instead of the whole, slow grind. So just as an example, you write an elementary number theory text using Jupyter Notebooks as a base because somebody has done the work for free previously. You might use exercises from another freely licensed text. So you take 200 exercises from Margaret's textbook and maybe put some out because it doesn't suit your book. Maybe you take some in because maybe you make some of your own because you need those examples. In other words, why does everybody have to start from scratch? I think it makes sense to imagine that we could, as a community, build up a big stock of usable things. Okay. So using a free text. So before I click to the next slide, I want to tell a story, a dopey story. So my wife and I, one time we got a car when we were first married. We got a car for basically nothing. Somebody in the family had died, and we thought, it's free. I mean, why would we say no? We thought, it proved to be a Dodge Aries K, and we learned the lesson that a good deal on a piece of crap still leaves you holding piece of crap. So a free text is no good unless it's good. Just because it's free doesn't make it good. I'd rather pay $100 than nothing if the $100 is good and the nothing is bad. So that's it. Nonetheless, I'd like to encourage people to consider looking at free texts, many of which are very, very high quality indeed. So what do you think about when you go to adopt a free work? Most of the things about a free text like this, like the story I just told, are things that you're going to think about free or not free. But there are some things that apply to free texts in particular, and I'm going to go through a few. So first of all, is it stable? There are some authors who believe in publish early and publish often. So you can find that some students in your room have, when you say on page 92, and someone might say, well, mine is on page 95, is that author has changed it around. Of course, the solution to that is to get a definitive edition. Just download it one day, put it on your LMS, and say to all the students, take your version from the LMS. Another point is that some authors base their book on something online. There might be a website, for example, that you're expected to interact with models, maybe a statistic book, and you have different models of what's happening there. And if that website changes over time, then you're a little bit up the creek. So that's something that you can ask about a free text. Is it based on something that's going to be stable for the entire semester? Ancillaries. Are there answers to exercises? Some people, they feel very important that their students need to have the answers to, say, the odd exercises or something. Are there classroom slides? Other ancillary material? some people, that's an important part of their teaching process, is that they absolutely need those materials there. And license. A lot of people, including sometimes authors, are confused about licenses. So it makes sense to look into the license that the author has put on the book. Just as an example, down at the bottom of the screen here, Chris Cunningham's Math Educator's Stack Exchange question, where he talked about adopting a text that is free, calculus text, and finding over time that colleague came to him and said, this book is not usable for my particular style of teaching because I need to do X. I need to have online quizzes that I assign every day, and this free textbook doesn't have it. So he learned some lessons that, there are things you want to consider. What about if you might think of authoring a free textbook? So of course, having done a couple, I have some ideas. So there are some advantages to writing a free textbook. First of all, there is less friction for an innovative approach. I mean, the fact is that you just can put up whatever it is that suits you. You don't need to go through an editorial process. Nobody is going to tell you the market is not going to buy that sort of stuff. You just simply put up what you want to put up. Second is that it allows for you to open your sources, is that you can put it up. I put mine, for example, in my GitLab account, and people can download it and change it if they find that that's useful. There are fewer boundaries. I've certainly been told by some authors that they were just simply not allowed to use color. They just simply were not allowed. Or they just were not allowed to have any kind of interactivity, and they wanted to have those things. So, if you are putting this up on your professional site, and, you can just do whatever you can do, as opposed to what the publisher will agree to have you do. And the next item is particularly important to me. Apply the pedagogical principles that you believe in. The cognitive science people, they're not the biggest dopes in the world. They know some things, and surely we ought to be able to learn from them. And having a salesperson come in and tell you, well, every other book does it this way, and so we should do it this way. And you say, but cognitive science, my understanding of cognitive science is that they say you should do it that way. Well, I'd like to do it my way. That's why I'm doing this, Let's see. So the next is that errors, corrections, even reasonably big moving around can happen immediately. If you find an error, and I'm sorry, there are going to be errors. You're going to find many and many error. People are going to send you an email and say, on page 153, third line up from the bottom. You're going to find lots and lots of them. You can just instantly correct it. Or you can say correct it at the end of every semester, or whatever is the process that you want to do. And there's no waiting for the next edition. Is just like that. A sort of related example is that translations can happen right in place. Is that I've had people write me and at least start on, I don't know if I ever had anybody finish, and say, look, I opened up my editor and I replaced your paragraph one at a time with Spanish or Greek or whatever, and all the math formulas are all the same. I just simply changed the words from one language to another. So that makes sense to me too. There are starting to appear some software systems that are keyed to free authors, and so there's some benefits there. There's some things that make sense there. You can experiment with models other than the current one, and just as an example, I can imagine, I've never seen anybody do this, but I can imagine a person who wants to write an elementary number theory text where the undergraduate class writes it. The undergraduate class is charged with developing the text, and the things that they find hard, they put a big explanation in. The things that they find easy, they just state as fact, sort of stuff. I can absolutely see that. In short, the tag at the bottom, I think, says it all. Is that I think there are often good reasons to work in one system or another, particularly with a commercial publisher. Sometimes there's absolutely excellent reasons to do that. It makes all the sense in the world. But if you don't have a reason to do otherwise, maybe it's reasonable to suppose that a good default is to say, I'll make it freely available and someone else can use it and I can use theirs, and we could all sort of climb together. You know, make sort of the long, slow climb from the primordial ooze together. Now, no doubt about it, there are some disadvantages to free text. So it's, balance is fair. So with some traditional publishers, authors have the advantage of having experienced editors, graphic artists, salespeople, etc. But when you're doing a free text, you're probably pretty much doing it all. In particular, the one that really strikes me is technical illustrations and typographic design. Is that those folks are paid a good amount of money because they know what they're doing. And if you open, say, a top of the market calculus text, the illustrations can be very, very good indeed. And lots of other books have very, very good indeed illustrations. And frankly, I can't do that. So that's all there is to that. I do the best I can, don't get me wrong, but I can't do that. Exercises. Exercises to me are the sort of major under-respected item in a free textbook. That when I talk to folks about this kind of thing, the thing I hear the least from them is about exercises. Everybody thinks making a presentation for what's the best way to introduce such and such a subject, what's the best way to introduce surfaces of revolution. Everybody thinks that that's fun. Everybody thinks that making up a lesson, doing that is a lot of fun, and that would be great. True. Now you have to make up the exercises. Okay, that's hard. It's just hard work. It just is. Instructors assign something like a dozen on each topic. Okay, so does that mean you need to make up a dozen? I don't think so. I think if you say, well, probably instructors want a little bit of a choice, so maybe twice as many. So now you're looking at 24 exercises in each section. How many sections do you have? Well, maybe a typical undergraduate class meets 3 times a week for 14 weeks, but not all of those days are occupied. Some days are exams, this kind of stuff. But so you end up with a surprisingly large number of exercises you're making up. I did a calculation there that comes up to 850, but in any event, you're making up a surprisingly large number of exercises. I'll also tell you my personal experience, maybe just because, that's the kind of person I am, but if I don't write down, I got to write it down. I can't just think it through. If I don't write down the answer to the exercise, I think there's like a 30 or 40% chance that there's a mistake in there. If I haven't actually looked through it, typed it out, and said yes, 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 that the material needed for this exercise is in the section and it fits in with the other exercises that haven't duplicated work in other exercises. If I haven't done all those things, then the exercise isn't right 30 or 40% of the time. So I feel that I have to go through and do each exercise myself. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It makes the book a lot better, but it's a lot of work. Ancillaries. So do you provide answers to some of the exercises? Do you provide Beamer slides? Do you provide video lectures, test banks, all these other things that you sometimes see with professional text, with professionally produced text? Okay, well, you have to decide those for yourself. Obviously, for myself, I think the answer to the exercises is really kind of a minimum, and I also like to do Beamer slides and video lectures, but I think everybody has to decide for themselves, and that's just simply a lot of work. And to be perfectly frank, it's not the fun part. So, what about a learning management system? What do you do? I personally haven't dealt with that. I haven't tried to provide a course that is key to a learning management system, but I could see a person thinking it's the right thing to do. And the last thing is how do you get people to hear about your work? And that's a problem. I don't know what to tell you about that. One of my books, so happens, I put it up on the internet before Google came around, and there were some websites already pointing to it. And so when Google started, they found these websites pointing to me, and so I ended up on the front page of Google. And then there's a network effect. So I got lucky, and that's a fact. A lot of people heard about it because I got lucky. But that's not as true today. So before writing, so if you're thinking of authoring, these are some of the things you need to think about. Just my personal take. The idea, how is what I'm doing different than what other people do? I sometimes see people say, I'm going to produce a book that's just like so-and-so, but it will be free. And all I can say is it's a lot of work for not much for not much impact. If all you offer is free, then I don't know. I think you think less of your time than maybe you should. So the audience, what sort of level reader sophistication are you aiming at? Classes that are first year, second year, or third year, fourth year, et cetera. You have to think about all those things, and how much effort are you going to put in? Maybe some of the material is already available. Maybe you could, for example, use some of your lecture notes. Maybe you can use something from another free work. What's your output media? PDF or HTML? I think that's a serious question. PDF, the fact is that you can produce, you have more control over how it looks in the output, and that you can produce sort of more permanent results, but HTML has a lot of advantages too. In particular, HTML is much more interactive. So, so there's that. So that's a major advantage. And then finally, you're going to ask yourself, what are you doing for ancillaries? What are you doing for answers to exercises, Beamer slides, that kind of stuff? And the license. I left that as its own item because often authors do not give it enough thought. They just, I'll make it free. Free is a complicated question. So back when I was working on the tech website, the CTAN, the tech website, some people would write in and just say, I just want to make it free. Well, it's not clear. I mean, some people want to, for example, say no commercial, that you can use it all you want for free, but you can't use it for a commercial purpose. You can't sell it and make money off of it. And then they wanted to have a book where at the back went a DVD which contained all of the CTAN material, and those people who had said no commercial couldn't go in the book. Their material couldn't go in the book because we were selling it. So free is a little more complicated than you think it might be. I personally will just recommend, and you can decide for yourself. I'm just going to tell you what I do. I do Creative Commons CC by SA, and so just Google CC BY SA, and another possibility that you often see is CC BY without the SA. So you can look those up and see if they suit you. I do the first one. I do CC by SA, and that's the only recommendation I'm going to make because everybody makes their own choice. Okay, where to put it? This is a problem. This is really kind of a problem. So the place where I am right now, UVM, offers a nice place on the web for faculty and students to put materials. It was very easy to set up a website, and I offer things for download. But if I leave UVM, I think that site goes away. So, you're looking for a permanent address. It's not really perfectly clear what a permanent address to use. Semi-permanent address, say a decade. As an example, if you're thinking of authoring, maybe it's good to have examples. So as an example, I'll talk about my latest, which is the theory of computation. So what's the idea of the book? So students come to us sort of in what Terry Tao calls a pre-rigorous stage, where mathematics is about examples and kind of hand-wavy, and next up is what people call a rigorous stage, what Terry Tao calls a rigorous stage, where you're trying to think in terms of precise ideas, trying to understand things in a formal way. And he has another level after that called post-rigorous. I'm interested in helping students make the transition from pre-rigorous to rigorous. That doesn't mean that my text is rigorous, but it means it helps students make the transition, helps students understand how you start with a relatively vague idea, and then you translate it into a more formal definition and you prove things about it. Okay. Audience is second or third year CS majors, math majors. I taught it for, 30 years at the place I was before, St. Michael's, and so I saw a lot of second and third year CS and math majors, and I think I got some insight into what helped them. The vital statistics. The PDF is the PDF is 441 pages. Let me read it off the slide. 865 exercises. Answers to exercises is a separate book, 197 pages. There are 150,391 lines of code and 1,714 graphics. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Decade of work. The license is CC by SA. I have fully worked answers to all exercises. That's a year. Took me a year. Ancillaries, I have Beamer slides, video lectures, and some Jupyter Computer Labs. The Jupyter Computer Labs are not really well formed. It's in LaTeX. The graphics are in Asymptote. I developed it with a unique text tool set. I worked in Emacs. I compiled a book with Make, that kind of stuff. And my versioning system was Git. So if you're thinking about what setup would you use, and you might say to me, what setup? Well, that's my setup. I have, if you don't mind, I have two personal bits of advice that I would give to you. There will be things that you feel that you're married to, that you cannot live without, and I'm talking about non-mathematical things. And we all have them. And Mr. Monk here will tell you that you have to satisfy yourself. So I'm going to give two of mine as recommendations for a potential author, and you can do with it whatever you think. Okay. Number one, LaTeX. It's got to be. It's got to have LaTeX. It's got to be in LaTeX. So on the left is a page from a perfectly reasonable, high quality, free, multivariable calculus textbook. I'm not making fun of it. I'm just saying, look at the left, look at the right. On the right is from my theory of computation. I'm sorry, look at the left, look at the right. I'm sorry, I got to have the right. That's just all there is to it. I got to have the right. The left is done in Word and the right is done in LaTeX. And I'm sorry, I simply got to have the LaTeX. Point two, the second of the 2 points. When I change something, let's say 100 lines, I commit the change to the source repository and push it to my GitLab account. And there's the there's the commands: git commit -a, and then git then I push it up to the master. Every once in a while, maybe every month, you make some mistake. You're typing and your finger is trying to say like A, and you accidentally hit the S, and a whole bunch of text disappears or whatever the heck happened. And you're like, okay, well, and then you realize, you say to yourself, wait, I have a repo. I just saved it last night when I finished, and so at most I'm losing 100 lines, and you can breathe again. Okay, I'm not a Git expert. I don't know much about it. I always have to look things up on the internet whenever I want to do something other than these 2 or 3 commands, but it has saved my bacon enough times that I'm telling you, it's really super worth it. It is just absolutely super worth it. Okay, so to finish, I want to talk about the role of free work in the profession. So my personal soapbox, in my personal opinion, this is a professional activity. It should be recognized as a professional activity. Don't get me wrong; it's not like an article, in the best journal in the world. It's just simply not. But it is professional activity and should be recognized. College and university should give professional credit for it. There should be regular ways to get adoption numbers and reviews of works like this. Aggregation sites, there should be single source ways to discover content. If you're looking for a partial differential equations textbook that is free, you should be able to go to whatever the canonical site is, freetext.org or whatever the canonical site is, and find there the high quality, whatever that means, high quality partial differential equation texts. Faculties could register adoptions. They could say, yes, I used this book last semester in my class. Maybe independent users too should be able to register and say, I'm not a faculty member, but I used this to learn partial differential equations, or to refresh myself on partial differential equations and found it good. Perhaps comment, perhaps rate the material, whatever. And there also should be archives. Materials can fall out of maintenance because authors can pass away or be hit by a car. I just heard a very sad story about a famous free author who was hit by a car, and then his departmental website got redone a couple years later, and because he wasn't around, his stuff just got deleted and is no longer on the internet. Materials can fall out of maintenance and they should be saved. Large projects need groups. Courses like calculus, elementary statistics, etc. can benefit from the contributions of many people, including authors, but also including programmers, graphic peoples, maintainers, etc. And all this takes money. All this takes a lot of support. Besides sites, there should be money for mailing lists, conferences, and etc. Now, people have been talking about this for a long time, but it hasn't happened, and it should happen. So that's my soapbox, that this kind of stuff has an important contribution to make to the profession, and it needs support. Okay, Okay, thanks. So if you want to click on some of the links, these particular slides are at my UVM website for at least for a while. I hope you have found it useful. Okay.